I am Jessica Fitzgerald. I am the Early Education Consultant representing the Office of Early Learning and supporting the Northwest region of the state. Today, I am excited to have Jenny Wilkinson with me. She is also an Early Education Consultant and she supports the North Central region. We have a couple other consultants on with us today who will be supporting us in the chat, and you'll see them in future webinar sessions in this series as well. Let's start that engagement now. So in the chat box, please share ways in which children participate in literacy, both in the classroom and beyond the school day.
So Jessica, we have exploring book reading, reading environmental print, conversation, play centers, some more conversations, listening to stories, listening to read alouds.
Awesome, thank you. So yes, and you can already tell that you are hitting literacy, read alouds, but also oral language and having those conversations as well. So we will continue sharing some of those and touching on those throughout our time together as well. And thank you for those of you who threw ideas in the chat there. We appreciate that. So today, our talking points, we will focus on developmentally appropriate practice, print-rich environments, and fostering print knowledge. Okay, so keeping the essential components of literacy instruction in mind, let's review developmentally appropriate practice, an aspect I'm sure many of you know well. The first quote we'd like to share says, "The developmentally appropriate practice in early childhood programs serving children from birth through age 8 reflects current research and the importance of a print-rich learning environment as well as intentional guidance and instruction from adults." A second quote comes from the LETRS Early Childhood Manual. "Good teachers are intentional in everything they do, setting up the classroom, planning curriculum, making use of various teaching strategies, assessing children, interacting with them, and working with their families." As stated in LETRS Early Childhood Educators, the National Early Literacy Panel results also confirmed that intentional instruction and guidance are important to facilitating learning in young children. Teaching approaches with targeted practice are more likely to be effective than non-targeted practices. As a reminder, these quotes are specifically about literacy development and do not negate the importance of play. We know that a balance of play and direct instruction has great benefits for children. So let's talk more about print-rich environments. How can a teacher intentionally create a print-rich environment? Please share ways in which you have contributed to or observed a teacher contribute to a print-rich environment in the chat box.
Labels on shelves, labeling items in the classroom.
All the labels.
Adding print materials like newspapers, magazines to dramatic play, names on the walls, accessible books. I like that part, accessible books. Environmental print items in dramatic play and other centers. Reading various sources of literacy, using children's names everywhere.
Yes, where it's meaningful. I can see that you all are, there are things that they can access regularly, meaningful activities with names and things that they're interested in, that they're playing with in their centers. So again, thank you so much for sharing. And many of the things you shared in the chat box align with some of the suggestions and strategies provided by our LETRS manual. So LETRS suggests these strategies for 4 and 5-year-olds. If you have your manual handy, or if you want to jot down a page number, you can find this on page 131. And it is the last paragraph on the page. Many of these, again, may be reaffirming to the activities you mentioned in the chat box. Continuing to involve children in playful experiences with print, like you said in the centers. Help children make signs, draw pictures, write their own stories, and dictate stories to go along with their play. Write down children's spoken stories and create books about them. One of a favorite classroom activity from when I was in the classroom. Continue to read with children, sharing favorite books and adding new ones. And then encouraging children to tell stories with increasingly complex plots and events. Again, hitting at the oral language, but also connecting to that print when we're writing it down. As noted in LETRS Early Childhood for Educators, young children need many developmentally appropriate experiences and guided intentional teaching to support their literacy learning in print-rich environments. When children's experiences with print are limited, they do lack the exposure needed to figure out how that print works, which puts them at risk for having problems learning to read and write. As stated on page 8 of the LETRS manual, many states have updated their own early learning and development standards. In North Carolina, this is evident in foundations, which again, I'm sure many of you are familiar with. In 2015, Head Start also updated their framework to align with research and evidence-based practices. So in the chat box, you will find a link to foundations, or if you're nearby your hard copy, you can grab that as well. We're going to take a few minutes to look at LDC 8. So look at that development and make connections. So referencing to page 104 foundations, or the screenshot, take a few minutes to type a specific activity that you have observed in the classroom that supports a developmental indicator for LDC 8, which is children develop interest in books and motivation to read. So share an activity that you have observed that supports an indicator.
Interactive read-alouds, that's a good one. Michelle says, class-made books about relevant classroom experiences shared and then added to the library, more interactive read-alouds, asking children to make predictions of what would happen next, having a basket of books by the carpet for students to choose to read while during transitions, dialogic reading. Yes, so much text everywhere.
Yeah, and I like that we can always connect to more than one guiding document. So right now we're connecting to foundations, but we also saw in the chat box decreasing that wait time and engaging during the transitions to activities. And so we all know just that being familiar with LETRS and knowing that these pieces, like having that basket of books, can also increase and connect to other documents such as LETRS and our guidance with our younger children. So just as a reminder, strategies for foundations for reading to use with preschoolers can be found on a couple pages later. I believe it's 110, that those strategies, that there are additional strategies for LDC indicators there as well, and how to integrate that into the classroom. All right, so now we'll talk a little bit more about fostering print knowledge and how we can support that in the classroom as well. So one of our favorite quotes from Early Childhood Letters is on page 1, and it is that early literacy is not about teaching young children to read at an earlier age. Early literacy is about giving them the tools that they need to make an easy transition to the next steps of reading and writing. And so early literacy encompasses foundational skills learned from birth to 5 and 6 years of age. And then early reading and writing encompasses skills expected in kindergarten and the early elementary grades, where our pre-K children are headed next. What does the research tell us? One of the many tools or skills we can foster in pre-K is print concepts. And you can see on your screen here that there are many research points and studies that point to print concepts. And so we'll read these 4. A central literacy goal during the preschool and kindergarten years is to teach print concepts and learning how print works. multiple exposures to print. We mentioned repeated practice earlier. So those multiple exposures to print in the early years help build the foundation children need for literacy acquisition and the motivation for learning to read and write. Highlighting the print and environment enhances young children's early literacy skills and their motivation to attend to written symbols. Many of you mentioned labels in the classroom, and this is one way that we can do that in a meaningful way for children. And then lastly, children begin to understand how print works long before they learn to read and write. And that just goes right back to the quote that we're giving them the foundation so they can make an easier transition when it is time for them to learn to read. Print knowledge includes both print concepts and alphabet knowledge. Sometimes we isolate those print concepts, but when we're talking about print knowledge, it includes both. So print concepts were mentioned a couple times in the research, so let's unpack print concepts. The first you see here is recognizing print in the environment. So children learn to recognize written symbols in their environment early on. This includes written symbols such as the logo of fast food restaurants, stop signs, themes or names of their favorite cereal. We often refer to this as environmental print. Children begin understanding that print is the visual recognition on how the symbol or word looks. And children learn that letters are a special kind of symbol system with specific shapes. With this experience, children learn that reading starts at the top of the page, and they learn the direction in which to move, and they just gain that general understanding of book features. So later on that they can focus on the content when they know how all of that works together. So then the next bullet you see is understanding that print carries meaning or carries a message. Through these repeated exposures and multiple opportunities with that environmental print and the read aloud you all mentioned, along with adult guidance, children learn that pictures represent real things, but they can also represent fictional as well. And they begin to associate the written label to the object. Again, you all mentioned that in your activities. So the children learn that the print or the black squiggly lines are the words, and that the images can go along with those written words to increase understanding. Thirdly, we have knowing that print is used for many purposes. It is important that children are given a multitude of experiences. So knowing that there are list writing and storytelling, information sharing, all of these are different purposes that that writing, that print, the text carries, and that print is nearly everywhere and that it serves a wide range of purposes. So experiencing print through writing. Young children see others pick up pencils and write or pens, and they want to imitate adults that they see and older children that they see doing this. So they learn the difference between drawing and writing as soon as they begin to make those little squiggly marks on the page to represent letters or messages. It is important to understand that these literacy and writing phases aren't separate, that we address all of these together. We do not teach them in a sequential order at this point, but we will see more as we unpack each of these throughout our series in more detail, and we'll see that through today's session and later. We also want to point out that alphabet knowledge and letter names will be further unpacked in an additional session within our series, so that part will not be addressed today in detail. So let's take a moment to connect back to foundations. The link is, I'm sure, still there in the chat, but if we need to throw it again so it's a fresher link, we can do that as well. Now we would like to look at LDC 10, Children Develop Book Knowledge and Print Awareness. So just as we did before, referencing page 106 of Foundations, let's type a specific activity that you have observed in a classroom that supports a developmental indicator for LDC 10, which is children develop book knowledge and print awareness.
So Jessica, we have free play in the reading center where children may mimic the teacher. Talk about holding a book correctly and identifying book features. Follow a visual schedule, steps to hand washing, for example. Students making squiggly lines and marks to represent letters when composing a letter to a family member. Practicing reading on the carpet, identifying characters in the story, modeling and encouraging concepts of print.
Yeah, so many different times of the day that this can be encouraged. We heard read alouds, we heard hand washing, again, maximizing those transitions and routines with pictures and words together, knowing that those carry meaning. All right, so again, more strategies for foundations for reading can be found on page 110 of the Foundations Manual. And we can consider which, you have considered which strategies you could suggest to teachers. As you support, you can use those, and just maybe some other ideas that a lot of us may know about, but not implement as much in the classroom, that were shared in the chat box as well. Becoming more intentional. Highlighting where the Science of Reading and North Carolina Foundations for Early Learning and Development overlap is a great way to show how both bodies of knowledge can work together to support learning and development for our young learners. And next, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny, who was going to begin by reviewing some information about the formative assessment process.
Thank you, Jessica. So let's start out by saying, first of all, that observation is at the heart of early childhood assessment, and it's a key guide in how teachers support children. This process includes gathering, recording, and reflecting on that information about the children's progress, and this informs our instructional decisions. And so this whole process is known as the formative assessment process. So we're going to take a look at the formal assessment definition, and this has been provided to us through the Council of Chief State School Officers. So I will just give you a moment to read through it. I won't read it to you, but I wanted to just give you a moment to read through that, and I'll pause right here. Thank you. Now, before we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to kind of point out that as we went through this, there were 4 words that really stood out to us, and we wanted to take a moment to highlight those. So if Jessica, you'll click on that first word for me, and that word is process. Formative assessment is a process rather than a product, and we're going to go into each one of these steps in just a few moments. But the next one is, the word is during. Formative assessment does not take place after instruction is completed. It takes place when you expect children to demonstrate their level of achievement, when they're expected to make mistakes. So formative assessment is happening during instruction. Now, the third word is feedback. During this learning process, students are provided descriptive feedback that is related to their criteria for success. Now, the descriptive feedback can come from a teacher, it can come from a peer, or the student themselves. The fourth word that we have is student. Now, it's important for students to be engaged in their learning by participating in the formative assessment process. This participation allows students to be able to answer 3 really important questions. Where am I going? Where am I now? And how do I close the gap? And this helps the student become that partner in the learning process. So let's summarize the key principles of formative assessment process. So you'll see on the slide here that formative assessments are ongoing. They're ongoing assessments. They provide reviews and observations in the classroom. They are embedded within that daily interactions and daily instruction. Teachers use formative assessments to plan and structure teaching practices, methods, and their strategies. And in contrast, think about this. In contrast to formative assessments, summative assessments occur after the learning, and they are more evaluative. Summative assessments are graded and usually have higher stakes. And those summative assessments are a product that are used by teachers to assess what has already been learned. And students are not involved in the summative assessment process at all. So think of it this way. This is your takeaway. Formative assessments are for learning, and summative assessments are of learning. Now, as we really concentrate on print concepts today, we want to think about those important skills that we're going to be formatively assessing as it relates to print concepts. And these include understanding how books are handled and used, knowing the difference between print and pictures, recognizing letters and word forms, using a left to right finger sweep across words when saying them. Now we know that they may not really be reading them, but they're going to be saying them. And that leads to that one-to-one correspondence. Now, we can gather evidence and document a child's knowledge of print concepts in authentic and meaningful ways during student learning to inform and plan our next instructional steps. Because we want to be able to facilitate that student learning in that authentic and meaningful way. Again, the key to formatively assess print concepts is that teachers are assessing while student learning is occurring. Most often, children are even unaware that they're being assessed because it becomes such a natural and organic part of the daily routine. Now, some examples of formatively assessing print concepts might include, we're going to give you a couple of examples here, providing daily opportunities for students to engage and participate in those read alouds, providing relevant books in all place centers, such as construction or architectural books in the Block Center, menus in the Dramatic Play Center, or art books in the Arts Center. We can also ask children where to start when teachers transcribe stories or begin reading their big books. We can encourage children to bring books from home to share and have them share and read to their peers. And we can place familiar read aloud text in the book corner for children to read or look at independently. And we can observe children and be a part of that formative assessment process when all of those things are happening. Now, in October 2021, very recently, the North Carolina State Board of Ed approved the Literacy Instruction Standards, more commonly known as LIS. Now, these instructional methods are necessary for meeting the expectations of Senate Bill 387. That's part of the Excellent Public Schools Act of 2021. Now, the LIS, or the Literacy Instructional Standards for preschool, reflect the level of expectation for teaching early language and literacy to be used within core instruction. And we're going to drop that link. Thank you for putting that in there, Sarah. I appreciate that. Now, one thing that I do want to mention to you is this, is that the LIS supports effective instructional practices for teachers. Okay. Now, in contrast, foundations that we shared earlier and that we went through earlier are the standards or those developmental progressions for children, for our students. Children require opportunities to engage in high-quality early literacy experiences throughout all learning environments every day. The LIS, or again, the Literacy Instructional Standards, which we know are the most effective practices. Now, these are written as core practices that teachers will intentionally integrate into their daily core instructional plan. Now, the LIS serves as a framework for the development and alignment of curriculum and instruction with research-informed practices. The LIS for preschool provides guidance to early childhood educators on essential evidence-based early language and literacy practices that lead to improved literacy outcomes. It's widely recognized that early language and literacy skills developed during the preschool years build the foundation for later literacy success and can mitigate disparities in a student's achievement. The LIS for preschool are designed to build consistency and effective classroom practices across the state, and these are grounded in both developmentally appropriate practice and the latest research in the science of reading, and are anchored by the following bulleted items that you see here: through engagement, reading materials and print awareness, oral language and vocabulary, phonological awareness, phonics later on. A lot of these we're going to be talking about in our following pre-K letters webinar series. We have fluency, comprehension, writing, small group, and again, that observation and assessment. All of those are very important. All right. So we're going to take the next few minutes to watch a print concepts video. Now this shows print concepts in action. Now this is during a teacher-led whole group lesson. And as we watch this video, I want you to consider these two things. I want you to consider how this teacher engages students throughout the read aloud with responses. And also how this teacher increases engagement through choral responses or body movement.
I'm going to read it. It's called, Is Your Mama a Llama? That is the title of our story today. So look at it again. Is your mama a llama? Now on the front of the book, there is always the author. And do you remember what the author does? The author writes the book.
Yeah.
So what does the author do?
Write the book.
Writes the book, that's right. And you see these pretty pictures that are drawn on here?
Yeah.
The illustrator does those. The illustrator draws the pictures. What does the illustrator do? Draws the picture. Now, there's two people that did this time. Remember, I tell you, this is their job. It's a fun job. So the author is Deborah Garino, and the illustrator is Stephen Kellogg. So you are illustrators sometimes, right? You draw pictures, and you write words sometimes, so you're also an author. We always start with the first word right here. And we go from the left here all the way to the right. And we read the left page first, and then we read the right page. So let's see. I want you to listen, okay? Is your mama a llama? I asked my friend Dave. No, she is not, is the answer Dave gave. Oh, do you see Dave?
No.
Oh, you have to look.
See a bat.
All right, we're going to turn the page. Are you ready?
See a bat.
She hangs by her feet and lives in a cave. I do not believe that's how llamas behave. Oh, so here, what do you think that is?
A bat.
A bat. So, there's our llama. Are you ready?
Yeah.
He says, oh, I said, you are right about that. Bat. There's the word. Look at that. Do you see that letter right there? A B.
What's the bat?
Is that an uppercase letter or a lowercase letter?
Uppercase.
It is an uppercase letter. But let's talk about this.
Moo.
Do you see this right here? It does say moo. We're very good. But look. Oh, let me show you. Listen. Do you see how it goes around? And it kind of looks like a cloud. And that's what the mommy is saying. The mama cow is saying moo. So you will see this sometimes in stories. Not in all stories, but in this story today, she's talking. So we now know that she's saying moo. A seal! And look. What is that again?
Seal.
But what letter is that? And is it uppercase or lowercase? uppercase.
Uppercase.
And look at all these other letters. They are all what? Lowercase. Because when it comes to your name, you remember we do the uppercase letter and then we do all lowercase letters. That's how I've taught you to write your name, right? All right, so look at this sentence right here. There's a lot of words in there, right?
Yeah.
All right. Can we count how many words are in this sentence?
Yeah.
Are you ready?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
How many are there?
8.
Eight.
Up there.
And this is the back of the book because it is the last part of the book. So see, what is this called?
The
back of the book. And it's like the, what is this? The front of the book. And then do you remember? Oh, you already know it's the spine. What does the spine do?
It opens the book. Opens stuff up.
And it does. You started to say something different. What did you start to say? It keeps what? It keeps everything inside. It keeps everything inside.
Now the word
box is.
bike boxes. The word on this page is trucking. Can you read it with me? Trucking. Let's see what's on the next page. Oh, I noticed signs on this page. We've been kind of looking at signs all week, so I was trying to get them ready for, to connect them to the signs in the book. So we did a few different activities before we read the book. We walked around our parking lot and looked at signs. We were able to look at the signs, and the children were able to connect them to their real life experiences. Brayden,
Stop. Turn. No.
could you come point to those signs, Ella?
Where? Stop.
Ella, come up and point to the signs. Which ones do you notice? Stop. This one is stop. This one is one way. What do you think this? What do you think this sign means?
No crashing into people.
No crashing into people. So no turning this way. Which way should you go?
That way.
Yes, it's this. The truck drives to the stop sign and then it reads the signs. They tell the signs tell the truck driver what to do on the road. I want to take a seat, Ella. This sign has 2 words. One way. This sign, how many words are on this sign? One. What's the word?
Stop.
What's the first letter of the word stop?
S.
S. This is the first letter of the word. It is S. And S says, that is in your name, Sophia, and stop both sound the same way at the beginning. S.
Even our name too.
I'm going to turn the page now. Oh. I don't see the whole truck on this page. I only see part of the truck.
Yeah.
Yes, and I only see part of the word.
It's Truck.
Yes, Ella said all of the letters on the truck, and that makes U-C-K. That, all those letters spell the word truck. Truck. Oh, here is the rest of the truck. Now there's more letters. Could you help me again? C, K, I, N, G. I have the children come up and point to words and point to pictures. I also have them answer questions. What are the trucks doing? They are going into the tunnels. This sign right here is a sign you might see on your way to school. It's a speed limit sign. It tells drivers what is a safe speed to drive. Do you see any more words? Leland, do you see a word on this page? Speed limit. What about over here? City. City line. It's the name of the bus.
What the top letters say? S, P, E, E, D,
Speed limit.
All right, so during this read aloud video that we just watched, we noticed that the teacher solicit much student engagement. So let's consider how the following print knowledge skills were demonstrated. How did she demonstrate the recognition of environmental print and the understanding that print carries meaning and that the knowledge that print is used for different purposes, many and different purposes? So do you have any ideas on that? You can just put them in the chat there if you would, please. Just consider, how did this teacher help her students understand that print carries meaning and that print is used for many different purposes?
Talking about how the truck driver would read the signs to know which way to go, highlighting the different signs and connecting sounds and sign names with student names. Showed the signs and asked the children where they had seen it and what it meant to them. I like that personal connection piece.
Absolutely. So, an important takeaway from this video is that while this teacher was very intentional in her demonstration and solicitation of responses from her students around print knowledge concepts, she was most likely simultaneously formatively assessing. Because think about Sophia. She gained some information about Sophia during that lesson. Perhaps she hadn't intentionally planned on it, but Sophia demonstrated some of her abilities and skills during that lesson. So that's something to take away from that. So think about it like this too, that remember, an opportunity for a teaching moment equates to an opportunity for assessment as well. Jessica and I wanted to share with you this important resource. The Office of Early Learning from DPI created Literacy at Home. This is a digital children's reading initiative, also known as DCRI. Now, this digital bank of literacy activities is intended for families and the community to easily access free tools and resources. Many teachers have also enjoyed the suggested activities as they continue their journey with the science of reading. The DCRI is organized by grade level, beginning with pre-K through 5th grade, and it's also organized by literacy skills. All of the resources that you can find in the DCRI can be incorporated into everyday life, and none of these activities require a sign-in or passwords. The DCRI can be found on the DPI website, and we are including the link in the chat here. Thank you. I can't tell if it got into the chat, but I'm just going to assume it has. Thank you. And Jessica, if you'll flip on to the next slide. Great. Thank you so much. We wanted to share with you again how all of the resources that we have at our fingertips, how they overlap. And you'll notice in the chart that we have listed ECRS R, the subscale, language, reasoning, 15, books and pictures. Take a moment to read over the items and reflect on how these strategies could foster print knowledge in a preschool classroom. Thank you, Jessica. She'll just flip on to the next slide. That's helpful. Thank you. Now, as we wrap up, let's think again about literacy as a whole. From the information shared during today's session, we'd like you to reflect upon the ways in which you can support early literacy development within your schools, classrooms, and centers. What we want you to do is drop one of your ideas in the chat there. Think about how you can support early literacy development based on today's information within your schools or centers.
Ensuring to have a print-rich environment, help teachers understand the importance of early literacy experiences, rotating books by themes, access resources you have shared to expand literacy in the preschool classrooms, let children take books home to share, reading books that will make children be more interested in books, books available all day and relevant to student interests, homemade class books with student family pictures or drawings.
These are some great ideas.
Sharing resources with family by posting on the webpage.
These are some really good ideas. And we just wanted to offer up a few more here. And as a leader, intentionally planning time to read books informally to children is a way to support that early literacy development. celebrating a teacher's wide selection of books that are accessible to children. I think we mentioned that in the chat there too. Supporting teachers by increasing the variety of books available for classroom use. And then finally, encouraging a teacher to increase the amount of writing modeled in the classroom. Again, all of these focus around that intentionality to provide that support for early literacy development. Now, we wanted to share an image with you today that you're going to see throughout our webinar series. This image depicts the essential components of reading instruction. Now, this is based on the National Reading Panel report and ongoing research that has emphasized the importance of oral language in reading development. You'll notice that speaking and listening have been placed in the very center, and this depicts where this reading development begins. Oral language is where the journey to reading development begins. The 5 components surround speaking and listening in a connected manner to demonstrate how they are all interconnected in achieving successful reading outcomes. Now, we are not born with brains wired to read. When fostering literacy, speaking and listening or oral language is an entry point to literacy instruction with young learners. We are born with brains wired to speak spoken languages, and this is where the journey to reading begins. To better understand each of the essential components of literacy instruction, we encourage you to join us for future sessions in this webinar series. During these sessions, you will learn about literacy practices that are developmentally appropriate and continue making connections among various guiding documents and resources for preschool. Jessica has shown you here a list of LETRS support for Pre-K Leaders series topics, the dates and time. And in the chat box, we're going to share the OEL calendar of events. You can scroll to the LETRS support for Pre-K Leaders series to register for these future webinar events. Jessica and I want to take this opportunity to sincerely thank you for joining us today. We hope that the information we've shared with you has been helpful. We appreciate your engagement so much by providing all of your thoughts and reflections in the chat with us today. And we truly look forward to seeing you at our next webinar on October 19th as we explore oral language and vocabulary.